In light of the 1-year anniversary of COVID shutting the sports world down, we're recounting the moments that shifted how athletes played the game, how fans watched the game, and ultimately, how we covered it. It's time for Weekly Pulse, your heartbeat to what's trending in sports. Let's start off this week's episode with my conversation with our Nancy Armour and Dan Wolken. We break down the moment COVID changed the sports world in just a few days, what we've learned over the past year, and finally, we look ahead to the road back to normalcy. So I want to know, what do you guys actually remember most from that week when sports were shut down?
Dan, I don't know if you remember this, but you sent me a text on March 10th. I looked it up before we did this, saying, what happens at the NCAA tournament if somebody tests positive? And my response was basically, I don't know. And I remember thinking at the time that the odds of that happening were probably going to be pretty slim. And maybe we were not thinking that this was going to be a problem. And then the next day is when Rudy Gobert tested positive, and which then led to basically the domino effect of North American sports shutting down.
I'm glad, Nancy, you mentioned Rudy, because we saw Rudy and the NBA shutdown, but I think most of the country, at least in my opinion, felt the gravity of the shutdown when March Madness was canceled. And Dan, you mentioned, you texted Nancy, but when you heard that was going to happen, that March Madness was going to be canceled, did you actually believe something like that, as iconic as March Madness, could just not happen?
I remember having discussions with my boss, with Dan, with Paul, with our, the rest of Scott Gleason, of what are they thinking? Why have they not called this yet? Because there is no way for this to go on. And I think when the NCAA finally did make the call, it was kind of like, or finally, what have you been waiting for?
We never got the 2020 March Madness, but Major League Baseball, the NBA, NHL were all able to adapt and finish their seasons. And the NFL, by the look of the calendar, had more time than any to prep. So Dan, I'll start with you. Who do you think has handled the pandemic the best, and who's been the worst? And Nancy, I want your opinion too, but.
Well, look, I think everybody's had different challenges. The sports are so different, just the nature of them, the amount of close contact that people have on the field, the number of players on a team. It's difficult. I think baseball had some hiccups early on, and then they did extremely well, as their season went along. But it's obviously a little bit easier in some ways to pull off baseball than it is other sports. Football is difficult. I think the NFL, the protocols they put in place, I think for the most part, seem to work quite well. The NBA in the bubble was tremendous, the way they pulled that off. It's been much more of a challenge once they've gotten into this season when they don't have a bubble. And you saw early on, especially teams were really struggling. And with the contact tracing, there were positive cases. So I don't know that it's fair to put one against another, because they've just had so many different issues to deal with individually.
What do you think, Nancy?
Well, I think we also have to recognize the NWSL and the WNBA. And for me, the NWSL probably is the one that I would spotlight, because they were the first ones to come back. And their protocols, what they did and how they operated, served as a roadmap for other leagues. Everybody was kind of thinking the same way, but the NWSL showed everyone that this is possible.
When do you guys think we will ever get back to the packed stadiums and that normal sports scene again, if we ever will?
I could see it happening some point in the NFL season, maybe. We're already seeing a slow return to normal. We've seen some fans in the stands at college basketball games, NBA games. Chicago, where I'm based, which has been very, very cautious in terms of protocols, has announced that there will be limited numbers of fans available for both the Cubs and the White Sox. And, part of that is because of vaccines allow it, the spread has gone down. And I think just knowing from people in, my circle of friends and family who, are even casual sports fans, they're just eager to get back, to return to normal. So I think if there is the chance and people feel that it's safe, I think you could have people back in stadiums, full-throated, all that, probably at some point in the fall.
Welcome back to Weekly Pulse. When it comes to normalcy in sports, no one was hit harder than the athletes themselves. Let's take a listen to how athletes across the leagues felt during the lockdown.
You didn't know really what to think. It's the first time it's ever happened in any one of our major sports leagues. So to see it happen, you knew at that point that it would trickle down to everyone else. And you was wishing for the best, but you kind of knew that the inevitable was going to happen. So we was hoping that it would only be a couple weeks, or it shut down for a little bit. We get a handle over this thing, and obviously, that was being way too optimistic.
I think like most people, I remember when they shut us down and going to a grocery store, I'm like, why are all these people wearing masks? And then a week later, I wouldn't go anywhere without it. So, it was quick, but it is what it is. It's something that we all have had to deal with. And, obviously our country's kind of felt the brunt of it, but, we're getting back and things are good.
All my uncertainty was really just April. We always go back for OTAs in April, and I'm not even sure if we're going to do that this year. But I was worried about, if I was going to be able to play this year, if my family was going to be able to come to the games, if my family was safe. So really just with sports, I thought, obviously how the NFL would be impacted, and then just thinking about my family and then being able to be there and support me.
I think it's just a learning experience for all of us, and just got to keep going, keep fighting through it. And every tough experience in life, makes you grow. That's what I've been going through, and we're gonna keep a positive mindset and get through it.
It's been a wild ride, and obviously we're still in the midst of it, but just continuing to be safe, continuing to find ways to stay safe, and I think that's been the biggest thing, the biggest message throughout.
I've just tried to follow protocol as much as it's been laid out to us. I go to the facility and I go home. Then I go to the arena and I go home, with my family. But I try to stay clean and try to get my sleep. I think that helps. I think that helps with any illness, just getting, your optimal rest, keeping your body as fresh as possible and keeping a clear head about it all. But I just part of luck. I can't sit here and say that I'm a ghostbuster when it comes to COVID, because I'm not. I just try to follow the protocol. That's all.
It's been a difficult year for just about everyone, including those in the sports world who are battling mental health issues due to coronavirus. Eric Cusin, a mental health expert and co-host of the We're All a Little Crazy podcast, has studied the ramifications of a pandemic which has affected so many in profound ways.
It's the first time in the history of our planet where every single person was going through the same set of outside stressors at the same time, and we were able to all see it because of social media. I mean, you think back to the last time a pandemic happened to this level was 1918 with the Spanish flu. We didn't have anything close to social media, right? So we could be sitting in our house, an athlete could be sitting in their house and watching what is taking place somewhere around the world, and they're seeing that people are facing those similar challenges. So now you add together social justice with the angst around the elections and with COVID, all collectively, what we refer to that as in the mental health space is trauma. Those are traumatic events that we're all witnessing and experiencing. And unfortunately, when it comes to trauma, it goes back to those individual traumas that we face, the loss of loved ones, the divorces, the job losses, the breakups, the not making teams, the not getting signed and your contract being renewed, having to retire from the sport. Those are typically the things that we think of when it comes to traumas. And because they happen on our own timelines, often with athletes, we think we're the only ones that go through it. And so we're in our own world and we don't know who else to open up about it. I think what made this time period unique is, yes, it's the perfect storm. So it was a lot to handle. But at the same time, there was a collective nature to this of, I can see other people are going through it similarly. And I think that also, in a way, is binding us together now. It's interesting, because we have an alliance of athletes that open up and share their mental health challenges in a real and raw way. A lot of the feedback that I got from athletes was, if I share what I'm going through right now, it's going to seem like it's the term that I heard oftentimes was Cadillac problems, meaning I have everything I could want right now. I'm stable. My house is secure. I'm not going to miss payments on my house. I'm living with my wife or my girlfriend or my husband, depending on who we're talking to. My pets are safe and fine. So if I start complaining about what I'm challenged with during the epidemic right now, it's going to seem like I'm crying over something that is not as difficult as what the average person's dealing with. And on the contrary, I think what athletes and celebrities have an opportunity to open up and share and talk about that makes it so relatable is the everyday things that we are all challenged with. So from them, I hear things like, I'm afraid to wake up in the morning and get a call from my mother or father that they're sick and that they contracted COVID. It upsets me when I drive to the arena and the ballpark on a given day and I see more and more homeless people outside. So I think there's this collective nature of the general stuff that we are all feeling right now related to the challenges that are going on in our world, where it's situational related to COVID, but then it changes the way that we feel secure in our own world. And the fear is because that's not something that's a major calamity to them personally, like the loss of a parent or being in a car accident, well, I'll be complaining if I share that. And again, on the contrary, I think what it's showing is the celebrities and the people who you would appear would have it all, they're facing challenges just like the rest of us. And that commonality is what brings us all together and actually makes us feel less alone. So one of the best analogies I ever heard from an athlete was from Derek Anderson, who said, in one hand, I could hold out a hand and you can give me $30 million in that hand. And the other hand, I'm carrying a very heavy bag of clothes, which is my stuff. Just because I have $30 million in this hand doesn't mean that this bag of stuff gets any lighter, right? So what an athlete needs to do on the court, on the field, on the ice becomes that much more difficult when that bag of stuff gets heavier and heavier. So as they're experiencing what they're experiencing, going through COVID and having to make those decisions, what it means is that bag is getting heavier. When that bag gets heavier, that means it's more difficult to catch that pass, to throw and hit that target, to make that hoop, because there's more weighing on them during that time. There's more for them to think about and to have to fight through. And so when we look at COVID is another piece of the bag and the clothes in that bag getting heavier and heavier. For some players, the bag isn't that heavy to begin with, or they have a larger bag to be able to hold on to more with. And so they can handle what's being thrown at them. For others, it's too much to handle.
After the break, we talked to the United Entertainment Group founder, CEO, and president, Jarrod Moses. Stick around. Welcome back to Weekly Pulse. As fans are slowly able to attend arena games, sports leagues are looking for ways to make up for lost revenue due to the pandemic. United Entertainment Group founder Jarrod Moses joins me to chat about the financial impact of COVID in sports and how teams are upgrading fan experience. With everything that's gone over this past year, sports shutting down entirely, to the bubble situation, to what it is now, how do leagues make up for this significant loss in revenue?
Well, there's going to be a few ways we see this happening over the course of, not just this year, but even the years to come. There's a few different ways that revenue is triggered in professional sports. The first one, which is probably the most obvious piece, is ticket sales. And if there'll be any kind of tax or inflation inside the actual sale of tickets, it would be unfair in a way to do that because fans have waited so long to kind of come back into the live sporting arena. But there could be an inflation in ticket sales. The second piece would be concessions, where money is made in concessions once they're inside the arena. And so there could be some kind of package created where you buy a ticket, get concessions for some sort of inflated price. And the third piece that wouldn't necessarily hit the fan, but would hit the industry would be in packaging the broadcast rights. And as they go into negotiating broadcast rights for the coming years, they may not make it up this year, but certainly in a couple of years where renegotiation happens, you could bet that there's going to be an inflated ask from the leagues for broadcast rights. So they'll make it up in the long run, maybe not in the short term, but more importantly, they'll get fans back into the arena and they'll make their money back eventually.
I'm glad you mentioned the TV deals, because will the NFL be essentially pandemic proof with their new TV deals coming up and the expansion of the regular season to 17 games? Because it sounds like the NFL is willing to save the cap this year by borrowing the money for future years, knowing new TV deals and expanded regular season on the way.
Yeah, I think absolutely it will be built into it. I mean, we all know the shrewd negotiation tactics of the owners. as well as the commissioner. And there'll be a way that they make sure they make up for the loss in the broadcast negotiation rights. My guess is they make back almost all of the losses in the years to come with this new package that they're going to be negotiating. And also remember, there's going to be an opportunity to secondarily window broadcast as well. So you'll have your network carriage and you'll have your streaming carriage, which has been, pretty successful for the league over the last couple of years. I can imagine them trying to couple the two, but don't be surprised if some of these streaming partners come in very aggressively to try to beat out this terrestrial network traditional package that's happened in the past. I would not be surprised if you start to see games more aggressively appearing on streaming than on broadcast.
And do other leagues have the same, fortunes as the NFL? Like, will we see an expanded NBA playoff?
Yeah, I think they will. The other leagues have less of an overhead than the NFL does, but it still is all the same, right? They still have to make up for their losses. So I do believe that they're all thinking the same strategy in terms of packaging and bundling their broadcast rights on both a broadcast and streaming platform.
Slowly, we're seeing more fans being able to attend games. I know you mentioned inflated ticket sales possibly, but from your experience and what you do know about these teams and how they generate revenue, how will the leagues and individual teams attract that same level of in-stadium and arena fans once we're allowed to experience?
Well, yeah, the first thing is safety, right? We have to make sure that fans feel comfortable coming back. And we're seeing how it's happening now with multiple tests as you go into the arena, right? You have to have your test a couple days before, your test actually at the arena, and then you go in. It's a logistical nightmare, but it has to happen in order for people to feel safe. So the first one is safety and making sure people feel comfortable. The second part is once you're inside, how do you make it an attractive experience? And that, I think, is bundling the experience in both concessions and in seats so that you walk in and you could truly enjoy your experience with one price without having to look to come out of your pocket a few different times once you're inside the arena. And then I think you could play with merchandise as well, right? So when you sign up for your ticket package, you get a shirt, you get some kind of seat cushion, you get some kind of merch that's fun to have as part of being a fan. And then when you enter, that experience is a wholesome 360 experience that you have. And then when you come home, could there be some kind of sneak peek behind the scenes that you get some chatter in the locker room, that you get broadcast directly to your laptop or your phone because you took that opportunity to buy seats in advance, so you get this content in advance as well. So I think there's ways you could create more of a holistic experience that was different than you would get before.
Last question I have for you, Jarrod. In your opinion, which league has managed most effectively during the past year?
I think the NBA has managed most effectively in the past year with the pandemic. It's not a lack for other leagues trying. Everyone's tried, and everyone's done an incredible job. Some things are harder to handle. The NFL is a much harder monster to handle just because of logistics of size and the traveling of teams and the ability to create the bubble. The NBA did an incredible job in creating that village, that bubbled village last year. Which worked beautifully. And I think this year, coming out of it, there was a lot of lessons learned that they were able to apply in how they travel teams and how they schedule teams, about stayovers in certain markets, and about managing that shortened schedule. So I think the NBA has done the best job, and also in marketing that experience as well, with the fans in the seats, the virtual fan, and the ability, for the local teams to engage in their own way with their audiences.
Welcome back to Weekly Pulse. We end this week's show with my interview with Florida Panthers CEO Matthew Caldwell to touch on what fans can expect for this NHL season and more.
I thought the league did an incredible job. Once we got into the bubble, there was no positive cases. The NBA was similar. So for a situation that none of us have ever dealt with before, I thought their ability to think on the fly and provide the safest environment was very impressive.
I think a very important conversation is sports' place in society. What do you think we've learned about it over the past year between the pandemic and racial injustice? It feels like sports continue to reflect what's going on in this country. Where does the NHL fit into that in your mind?
Yeah, I think sports, the NHL specifically, play a big role in community issues. They provide live entertainment. We know that demand is there. Their folks are, we're able to have fans this season. So we've had about 4,000 people in the building, and we've been, quote unquote, selling out, which is great. I mean, obviously long term, we can't be at 4,000 people, but our TV ratings are up almost 50% over where they were last year. So people clearly missed live action in sports, especially our hockey fans. And, I think it's great that the athletes are speaking their mind and speaking up about social justice issues. I think it's wonderful. I mean, they're great role models for what they've accomplished in their career and where they've come from, where they've gone. So I think it's great that sports have become, kind of a big sounding board, for our community.
Looking ahead, it appears the days are getting better, not worse, with everyone adapting to the pandemic, the vaccine rollout picking up. You mentioned the Panthers are allowing 4,000 fans, roughly. Yeah. I spoke with Sean when the pandemic kind of just happened, and we talked a little bit about safety protocols, but how are you guys able to provide a safe environment in an indoor arena right now, just as a kind of an update?
Yeah, I mean, Sean McCaffrey has led that whole effort. He's done an incredible job. I'll start with our owner. First and foremost, he kept us all employed, so that's incredible. And I say that a little bit tongue in cheek, but also it's hard for sports teams. I mean, I understand where other teams have come from. Most of them had to lay folks off. We had no revenue coming in for almost a year. But our owner, Vinny Viola, is incredible and stood by our people, and we laid up. We didn't lay anyone off. We didn't cut any salaries. So with that, we had people that can plan ahead. And Sean led the effort, starting in the summer. He said, okay, we're doing this return to play for the playoffs and the bubble, but we're going to be getting back to opening up our doors, whether it's October or December or end up being in January. We need to be ready. So he started with getting the Well Building Institute health and safety rating. We're the first NHL arena to have that certification. And that's a global benchmark that evaluates how you can have gatherings in public spaces. So we were very proud of that. That was the first big step. We went completely cashless in the arena, so people are only using their credit cards. And I'm sure Sean told you all about this, and the fans like it. They can move much more quickly through lines. They can order from their phones. We have mobile ordering. We have red reminders all over the arena. We have hand sanitizers everywhere. So we're obviously masked up. So that preparation, we were ready for opening night. So we were one of only 3 arenas to open the season up with fans.
I'm very curious, what are the conversations right now surrounding the season's NHL playoffs and the Stanley Cup? Because I know President Biden said that Americans should have access to vaccines by the end of May. I know here in New York, it's a little, we don't know that. But given that timeline, is there any chance we could see packed arenas for the Stanley Cup final?
Yeah, I think there's a chance. We're monitoring it. We just had another meeting on it yesterday. We want to be safe, first and foremost, right? I think all of us are seeing some light at the end of the tunnel and hoping by next season we can get back to packed arenas, but we don't want to rush it. So, we're at 25% capacity right now. Most teams are in and around. We have about 11 teams that are open now, and more submitting plans to let fans in. I don't think the 7 teams in Canada will open up, but, I think, a good majority of the U.S. teams will have at least fans. And I think by playoff time, it's hard to forecast, what percentage capacity, but, we will be trying, if we can do it in a safe manner, to start increasing, the capacity. So, it comes down to vaccination rollout, like you said, continuing to test, case count, but we're monitoring it very closely.
That's a wrap for us here at Weekly Pulse. I'm Mackenzie Salmon. See you next time. Hey sports fans, if you want to see more videos like this, check out some of our other ones right here. And if you like what you see, make sure to hit the subscribe button and stay tuned for more from USA Today Sports.